In 1943, at the height of her Hollywood fame, Rosalind Russell suddenly disappeared. No movies, no public appearances. She simply vanished. For decades, the official story was exhaustion. Now, her son Lance finally reveals the devastating truth. But that's not the only secret they kept. From her real birth year to the untold story behind her Oscar night heartbreak, this is the Rosalind Russell nobody knew. Rosalind Russell was born on June 4, 1907, in Waterbury, Connecticut. Her family was rich, and she grew up in a huge house with 18 rooms at 305 Hillside Avenue. There were servants to help with everything. Her father, James Edward Russell, was a successful trial lawyer who made a lot of money working for big companies. Her mother, Clara McKnight Russell, came from a wealthy family and worked as a fashion editor for Vogue magazine. Rosalind's name didn't come from Shakespeare's play As You Like It, even though many people thought so. Her parents named her after a steamship, the SS Rosalind, which they had traveled on. This unusual name matched her personality, which would lead her to a unique life. Rosalind went to strict Catholic schools, including Marymount College in Tarrytown, New York. Her life was sheltered, but she wanted more freedom and excitement. At 19, she secretly applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. She knew her parents wouldn't approve, so she lied to her mother, saying she wanted to become a teacher of dramatic arts instead of an actress. This small rebellion showed her bold spirit, which became a part of her personality and career. Later in her films, she often played independent women who stood up for themselves. After finishing at the Academy in 1929, Rosalind started her career. Her family didn't like her decision, but she didn't care. She worked as a fashion model to make money, posing for top designers and appearing in magazines. But she never gave up on acting and kept looking for stage roles. Her first big break came in 1930 when she got a part in the Broadway revue Garrick Gaieties. The show was a success and ran for 161 performances, giving Rosalind her first taste of fame. In the summer of 1930, Rosalind made a daring choice. She joined a stock company in Saranac Lake, New York, even though her parents didn't want her to. She lived in cramped quarters and performed a new play every week for 7 months. This experience was tough, but it made her a better actress. She learned to adapt quickly and think on her feet, skills that would later make her famous. In 1931, she joined Edward E. Clive's repertory company in Boston. During this time, she realized how important voice acting was for the new talking pictures. She began taking serious voice and singing lessons to prepare herself. In 1932, Rosalind briefly tried opera. She performed in small venues around New York, but soon realized her voice wasn't strong enough for classical singing. Instead of being discouraged, she used this experience to push herself harder. She decided to focus on Hollywood and acting in films. By 1934, Rosalind moved to Los Angeles to chase her dream. She had her modeling experience and Broadway background to help her stand out. Universal Studios offered her a contract soon after she arrived, but her time at Universal was terrible. On her first day, she felt ignored and unwelcome, and the studio didn't treat her well. Rosalind quickly realized Universal wasn't the right place for her. At the same time, MGM, the most prestigious studio in Hollywood, noticed her. They invited her for a screen test, and Rosalind saw this as her chance to escape Universal. She came up with a clever plan to get out of her contract. She decided to make herself look so terrible that Universal wouldn't want her anymore. On June 15th, she went to meet Carl Laemmle Jr., the head of production at Universal. He liked glamorous women, so Rosalind did the opposite. She messed up her hair, smeared her makeup, wore ugly clothes, and even used an annoying voice. She slouched and acted clumsy, even spilling coffee on his desk by accident. For 45 minutes, she complained non-stop about how miserable she was at Universal. Carl was so uncomfortable and unimpressed that he agreed to let her go. The moment she left his office, Rosalind rushed to fix her appearance and headed straight to MGM to sign a new contract. Just 17 days later, on July 2nd, 1934, Rosalind officially joined MGM. She signed a 7-year contract, and the studio was already excited about her potential. Her first big opportunity came quickly. She was cast in Evelyn Prentice, a movie starring big names like William Powell and Myrna Loy. Rosalind had a small but important role as Mrs. Nancy Harrison, with only 12 minutes of screen time. But even in those 12 minutes, she made a strong impression. During filming, there was a tough moment when she had to perform an emotional breakdown in a courtroom scene. She was nervous about acting alongside such famous stars and couldn't get the scene right at first. The director, William K. Howard, got angry and yelled at her in front of everyone. Instead of falling apart, Rosalind used her real frustration to fuel her performance. She cried for real and delivered such a powerful scene that everyone was amazed. The film came out on November 9, 1934, and critics noticed Rosalind's talent right away. The New York Times even mentioned her by name, praising her performance. MGM executives saw her potential and gave her a raise, boosting her salary from $300 to $500 a week. By the end of the year, she had already landed roles in 3 more films, and her career was on the rise. Her big moment came in 1939 with the movie The Women. It wasn't an easy journey to get the role. The director, George Cukor, originally wanted someone else, but when that actress couldn't take the part, Rosalind stepped in. She boldly walked into his office and said, "I am Sylvia Fowler." Cukor gave her a chance, but the first 4 screen tests didn't go well. He thought her performance was too over the top and not sharp enough. Each time, Rosalind went back to her dressing room in tears, but refused to give up. For her 5th and final test, she went all out. She spent $500 of her own money on a custom outfit and studied a panther at the zoo to make her movements more sly and feline. She gave her best performance, and it worked. On April 25, 1939, she was officially cast as Sylvia Fowler. Filming started in May, and Rosalind didn't just stop at acting. She worked with the hairdresser to create Sylvia's unique flipped hairstyle, which became a trend among fans. When the movie was released on September 1, 1939, it was a massive success. Rosalind's performance stood out, and critics loved her sharp wit and comedic timing. The movie made over $2 million, and Rosalind's salary was raised to $3,000 a week. She became one of Hollywood's top comedic actresses. During filming, though, there was one infamous moment. On June 17, 1939, Rosalind and her co-star Paulette Goddard were filming a fight scene. They were supposed to have a playful catfight, but after 14 takes, everyone was exhausted and frustrated. On the 15th take, things got out of control. In the heat of the moment, Rosalind bit Paulette on the leg. Paulette screamed in pain, and filming had to stop. Rosalind's bite broke the skin, and Paulette needed 3 stitches. The studio quickly came up with a fake story for the press, saying Paulette had hurt herself while riding a horse. Rosalind was horrified by what she had done and tried to apologize, but Paulette refused to talk to her for weeks. Eventually, they made up and even became friends later on. The bite left Paulette with a small scar on her leg, which could be seen in some of her later movies. In her 1977 autobiography, Russell finally addressed the incident publicly, writing, "I've played many animals on screen, cats, snakes, you name it, but that day, I actually became one. It's a moment I've regretted for decades, but it taught me an invaluable lesson about the line between acting and reality." The bite scene, while not used in the final cut of the film, has become legendary in Hollywood lore. In 2019, during the 80th anniversary screening of The Women at the TCM Classic Film Festival, Goddard's granddaughter revealed that the family still owned the dress Paulette wore during the infamous scene. Rosalind Russell became one of the most unforgettable stars of Hollywood's golden age. Her big break came in His Girl Friday, 1940. Where she starred opposite Cary Grant. The role of Hildy Johnson wasn't originally meant for her. Director Howard Hawks first offered it to Carole Lombard, but her fee was too high. Other stars like Jean Arthur, Irene Dunne, and Ginger Rogers also turned it down. Even Russell herself doubted she could play the part and tried to convince Hawks not to hire her. The movie was famous for its rapid dialogue, spoken at an incredible speed of 240 words per minute, nearly 3 times faster than usual. To keep up, Russell practiced her lines for hours every day. She pushed herself so hard that she fainted during rehearsals, and even developed a stammer, which she had to work hard to fix. What made her performance even more impressive was her improvisation. Russell felt her character didn't have enough good lines, so she secretly hired a copywriter to create extra quips for her. She slipped these into scenes without warning, surprising Cary Grant, who had to quickly react to her ad-libs. This gave their on-screen chemistry a lively, unpredictable feel. When the movie premiered, Russell left the theater halfway through, convinced she had done a terrible job. But the film became a massive success, earning over $2 million, a huge amount for 1940, and made Russell a comedy star. Russell's career wasn't just about comedy. She earned 3 Oscar nominations in 5 years for very different roles. In My Sister Eileen, 1942, she played Ruth Sherwood, a character from Ohio. Though Russell was actually from Connecticut, she worked with a dialect coach for months to perfect a Midwestern accent. Her role was so convincing that audiences believed she really came from Ohio. In Sister Kenny, 1946, she played Elizabeth Kenny, an Australian nurse who developed a controversial polio treatment. This role was personal for Russell because her nephew had been treated using Kenny's methods. She spent 6 weeks living with the real Elizabeth Kenny to learn her mannerisms, even copying her walk. Her 3rd nomination came from Morning Becomes Electra, 1947, where she played Lavinia Mannon, a dark and complex character. This role was emotionally draining for Russell, and the intensity of the film caused her to have a nervous breakdown after it finished. At the 1948 Oscars, Russell was so sure she would win for this role that she started to stand up when the Best Actress winner was announced. To her shock, Loretta Young's name was called instead. Russell later joked about how loudly she sat back down. One of Russell's most famous roles came later in her career, with Auntie Mame. She first played the part on Broadway in 1956, and then in the 1958 film adaptation. Getting the role wasn't easy. Producers wanted Greer Garson for the part. Russell had to fight for it, even performing scenes in the producer's office to prove she could play Mame. On Broadway, the show ran for 639 performances, and Russell never missed a single one, even though she was struggling with severe arthritis. In fact, repeatedly throwing her arms wide during one of her iconic lines caused her to develop Auntie Mame's elbow. When the story was turned into a movie, studio executives thought Russell was too old for the role. She insisted on a screen test, using full makeup and costume to hide her age, and she won them over. The film became the highest-grossing movie of 1958 and earned her another Oscar nomination. Fans adored her as Mame so much that they sent letters asking her to adopt them. One fan even broke into her house, believing she really was Auntie Mame. Russell was equally skilled in both comedy and drama. She went to great lengths to prepare for her roles. In The Women, 1939, she hired a boxer to teach her how to throw a realistic punch for a fight scene. Her comedic timing in His Girl Friday was so important to her that she even had her wisdom teeth removed to improve her delivery. On the dramatic side, she took things just as seriously. For The Trouble with Angels, 1966, where she played a nun, Russell lived in a convent for 2 weeks to understand the routine of the sisters. Her commitment to dramatic roles was most intense during Morning Becomes Electra. To stay in character, she isolated herself from the cast and even had a soundproof dressing room built so she could focus. Russell's versatility extended beyond acting. She learned singing and dancing for the Broadway musical Wonderful Town, winning a Tony Award despite having no prior experience. Early in her career, she had been frustrated by being typecast in supporting roles, so she secretly studied serious acting and literature to prove her dramatic abilities. This determination allowed her to redefine her career on her own terms. However, constantly switching between comedy and drama took a toll on her mental health. In later years, Russell revealed she had struggled with bipolar disorder throughout her career. She believed her experiences with mood swings helped her bring emotional depth to complex characters in films like Picnic, 1955, and Gypsy, 1962. Her struggles and triumphs made her one of the most remarkable actresses of Hollywood's golden age. The story of how Rosalind Russell met her future husband, Frederick Brisson, is a tale worthy of a Hollywood romantic comedy. In 1939, Brisson was traveling from Europe to America by ship. During the trip, the film The Women was shown on repeat, and Brisson became fascinated with Rosalind's performance as Sylvia Fowler. He joked to his friends, "I'm either going to kill that girl or marry her." Little did he know that his chance would come, thanks to Cary Grant. When Brisson arrived in the U.S., he stayed at Grant's guest house while Grant was filming his Girl Friday with Russell. Brisson was eager to meet Rosalind and begged Grant to introduce them. Grant, always up for matchmaking, asked Russell every day on set, "Have you met Freddie Brisson?" She found it amusing and would reply, "No, what is that? A sandwich?" Grant didn't give up, and on February 23, 1940, he finally made it happen. One evening, Rosalind opened her door, expecting to go out dancing with Grant, but instead found him with Brisson. Grant introduced the two, and they all went out for dinner. That night sparked a romance that soon turned into one of Hollywood's most lasting marriages. On October 25, 1941, Rosalind and Frederick got married in a glamorous ceremony in California. Cary Grant, of course, was the best man, fitting for the person who brought them together. Their happiness grew when, on November 7, 1943, they welcomed their son, Carl Lance Brisson. Lance's birth came at a high point in Rosalind's career, just a year after her Oscar-nominated performance in My Sister Eileen, 1942. The couple remained devoted to each other for 35 years until Rosalind's passing in 1976. On their 35th anniversary, Brisson gave Rosalind a gold bracelet with 35 in diamonds, which she cherished and wore until her final days. Rosalind managed to balance her successful career with motherhood in a way that was ahead of her time. She didn't keep her son away from her work. Instead, she brought Lance to film sets. She wanted him to understand that acting wasn't all glamour, but hard work too. Even after becoming a mother, Rosalind continued to take on demanding roles. She gave another Oscar-nominated performance in Sister Kenny, 1946, just 3 years after Lance was born. She also worked on The Velvet Touch in 1948, a film produced by her husband, showing how they collaborated professionally. Despite her busy career, Rosalind made sure her family life came first. She and Brisson bought a Beverly Hills home in 1941, paying in cash to create a stable and loving environment for their family. This home remained their sanctuary throughout her life, giving them a sense of normalcy amidst the Hollywood chaos. Rosalind's Catholic faith played a big role in shaping her life and career. In Hollywood, she was an active member of the Good Shepherd Parish and the Catholic Motion Picture Guild in Beverly Hills. Her faith sometimes connected with her work in surprising ways. For example, while preparing for her role in The Trouble with Angels in 1966, she learned from a former school friend, now a mother superior, that a Catholic school in St. Louis needed funds for a new building. Rosalind convinced Columbia Pictures to hold the film's premiere in St. Louis, with ticket sales benefiting the school. This act of generosity added depth to her portrayal in the movie and helped the school greatly. Rosalind's faith shaped her career and the way she carried herself on set. She was known for her professionalism and dignity, which she always connected to her Catholic upbringing. Instead of harming her career, these choices made her stand out as a sophisticated and respected actress. Rosalind Russell's later life was full of ups and downs. In the 1950s and 1960s, as Hollywood was changing, she moved to television and stage work. On September 15, 1953, she surprised everyone by appearing on TV in Schlitz Playhouse of Stars. People were used to seeing her in movies, so this was a big deal. It worked out well, though, because her TV appearances became very popular. In 1958, she did a live broadcast of Wonderful Town on CBS, and over 27 million people watched it. That was almost half of all homes with a TV at the time. Around this time, she became a star on Broadway. In 1953, she performed in the musical Wonderful Town. It was based on her earlier movie, My Sister Eileen. The show was a huge success, running for 559 performances. Winning a Tony Award for Wonderful Town in 1953, was a big moment for her. She hadn't been on stage in almost 20 years, but came back stronger than ever. She wasn't even trained as a singer, but she worked hard for 6 months with a coach to learn the songs. During the show's run, she performed 8 times a week, which was exhausting. At the Tony Awards, she won Best Actress in a Musical, and the audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly 4 minutes. It was a special moment for her, and she later donated the Tony Award to help arthritis research. Her life took a tough turn in the late 1960s. On her 62nd birthday in 1969, she found out she had breast cancer. Just 3 days later, she had surgery to remove the cancer. At the same time, she was dealing with rheumatoid arthritis, which hit her suddenly. One morning, she woke up and couldn't move her hands or feet. She said the pain felt like slamming her fingers in a car door repeatedly. Despite this, she kept working and even hid her illness from the public by wearing special costumes and makeup. Her health got worse over time. By 1971, she had lost a lot of weight and had to take 26 pills a day just to manage the pain. The cancer came back, and in 1972, she had another surgery. Even though her body was failing her, she kept pushing through and finished her last film, Mrs. Polifac's Spy, in 1971. This project was special to her because she not only acted in it, but also wrote the script. She used the name C.A. McKnight, her mother's maiden name, for the writing credit. This wasn't the first time she used that name. She had done it years earlier when she wrote The Unguarded Moment in 1956. It felt like things had come full circle for her. But making this movie wasn't easy. Rosalind was very sick by this time. She had rheumatoid arthritis, and it was getting worse. The medicines she was taking changed how she looked and made working hard. Still, she pushed through and finished the film. Sadly, the movie didn't do well, and she later wished she hadn't talked about her illness publicly. She believed it made studios hesitant to work with her. Reflecting on her struggles, she once said, "Losing your health is the worst thing that can happen to anyone." This marked the end of her long movie career, which had lasted nearly 40 years with more than 50 films. Instead of letting her struggles hold her back, Rosalind became an advocate for arthritis research. In 1970, she spoke publicly about her condition for the first time. She even removed her gloves during a congressional hearing to show her swollen hands, which shocked everyone. Between 1970 and 1976, she raised over $20 million for arthritis research by hosting events and making speeches. She also helped pass the National Arthritis Act in 1974, which provided funding for research and treatments. Even in her fragile state, she worked with doctors to test new treatments, hoping to help others who were suffering. In 1976, just months before she passed away, Rosalind gave a speech at a medical conference. She was in a wheelchair and in a lot of pain, but spoke passionately about finding a cure for arthritis. Her words inspired many, and her legacy lives on through the Rosalind Russell Medical Research Center for Arthritis. The center has helped millions of people and continues to do important work. Rosalind passed away on November 28, 1976. But her story didn't end there. In 1977, her autobiography, Life is a Banquet, was published. She wrote it with Chris Chase, and it showed her life in her own words. Funny, honest, and full of great stories. The title fit her perfectly, as she always lived life like it was a big feast of experiences. One of the biggest surprises about her life was revealed by her son, Lance Brisson. He shared that his mother had a serious nervous breakdown in 1943. This happened when her career was at its peak, just 3 years after her famous role in His Girl Friday. Rosalind was trying to balance her career with being a new mother. On top of that, she was working hard for the war effort, doing USO shows and fundraising. To make things worse, 2 of her siblings passed away during this time. All of this was too much, and Rosalind collapsed. She described it as waking up one morning and falling in a heap. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital and didn't act in any films in 1944. After recovering, she decided to take on more serious roles, like Sister Kenny and Morning Becomes Electra, that helped her grow as an actress. Another surprising truth about Rosalind was her age. For years, she told everyone she was born in 1908. After she died, It was discovered she was actually born in 1907. This wasn't unusual at the time, as many actresses lied about their age to seem younger. Hollywood often favored youth over talent, especially for women. Rosalind was so committed to this lie that even her autobiography listed the wrong year. This small deception changes how we see her career. For example, she was actually 33, not 32, when she starred in His Girl Friday. This shows the unfair pressures actresses like her faced, always having to appear younger to stay relevant. Rosalind's personal life was just as interesting as her career. She came from a big family with 6 siblings and often felt stuck in the middle. She called herself the ham in the sandwich. Her family went through hard times, especially in the early 1940s when 2 of her siblings died. These losses added to her stress, but the family worked together to protect Rosalind's public image during her breakdown. One of the happiest parts of her life was her marriage to Frederick Brisson. Their love story was like a movie. They stayed together for 35 years, which was rare in Hollywood. Rosalind's influence didn't stop with her movies. She worked hard to help others, especially with arthritis research, because she suffered from the disease herself. In 1974, she started the Rosalind Russell Medical Research Center for Arthritis, which still helps people today. Her son, Lance, continues her work, supporting the center and other causes she cared about. Rosalind's legacy also lives on in her films. She showed audiences strong, independent women in roles like His Girl Friday and Auntie Mame. These characters inspired many women to be bold and follow their dreams. In 2009, a documentary about her life called Life is a Banquet introduced her story to a new generation. It shared both her successes and her struggles, giving people a fuller picture of who she really was.